Thank you so much, Justin. Thank you for inviting me. It's a pleasure to be with all of you. I spent some time in Texas about 10 years ago, but it was Dallas. So quite a distance from Houston. But I remember it was in the summer. I think it was about 110 degrees. So I'm not going to forget that anytime soon, especially here in Iceland. So I think I should start with the history of Jews in Iceland. I'd like to go through some of the interesting things that have happened over the last couple hundred years, a little bit more, and then talk a little bit about a Jewish life today, what we have going on in Iceland now, and then of course I would love to hear questions from you guys. So I prepared some pictures to go along with some of what I'm going to say. So here and there I'll switch over. I'll share my screen so you can see some of the pictures that I prepared, some historic pictures and some current photos. So first I should say that Iceland is probably most famous, at least internationally, it's most famous for its beauty, its natural beauty. Wherever you go in Iceland, you find unbelievable landscapes, and you just don't get tired of it. So I'll just show you a few photos, and these are not from Google. These are taken from my phone. So this is literally what you see when you just drive out of the city, and even in the city, you see the beautiful mountains and beautiful water. So it's really quite amazing. So here's share screen. Let's see if this works. Can you guys see my screen? It looks like it, right? Okay. So we have, let's see if I could, there. So this is just one of the waterfalls, one of probably tens of waterfalls. And this is just like a typical site. You see the lava, you see the water, the rainbows. It's really outstanding. This is the Glacier Lagoon. So this is about 5 hours away from Reykjavik, but it's actually where one of the glaciers meets a lagoon. So you have all these chunks of glacier just floating down the river and into the ocean. Here you have the black sand beach. So because of all of the volcanoes and all of the volcanic activity over the years, basically all of the sand is going to be black wherever you see sand. So this is called the black sand beach, but really probably all of the beaches are black sand. So Iceland is really very famous for its nature, but actually within Iceland, I would say that Reykjavik is really the capital and where most people are hanging around. So this whole country has a total population of about 330,000, and about 2/3, 230,000 approximately, are all in the greater Reykjavik area, all in the capital area. So Reykjavik is really where everything is going on. So I'd like to start talking about the history of Jews in Iceland. So going way back, even before Jews settled in Iceland, there was a name for Jews. Jews were called Gyðingar. And Gyðingar actually comes from the word Guð, which means God. So I think it's quite interesting that they had this name for Jews, a derivative of God. There are the Icelandic sagas. So they have one saga which is called the Gyðinga saga, which is the Jewish saga, and that was written in the 13th century, and it's really the story of the Maccabees and the story of Hanukkah. So many Icelanders might have not met a Jewish person, or at least didn't know that they were Jewish before seeing an event or something advertised now. But they actually have it in their history, in the sagas. Not everybody studies the sagas, but the people who do, there's the Givinga Saga right there, the Jewish saga. So this is before Jews settled in Iceland. After some research, we've discovered, I was not the one who did the research, but it has been discovered that the earliest Jews who settled in Iceland, at least what we have recorded, is in the year 1625. So the earliest Jews were coming mostly from Denmark. There were some Polish Jews, some Jews from the Netherlands, some Danish Jews, but for the most part they were coming from Denmark. All of them were basically in Copenhagen, and that's where they were coming from. So Justin mentioned this before, there's a close connection between Denmark and Iceland. Actually, Iceland only gained independence from Denmark in 1944. So there's a lot of connection between Iceland and Denmark. The first Jews were merchants. They were selling all different types of things, and some of them were quite successful, which is why I think we know about them so many years later. Moving along a bunch of years, all the way till the year 1913. I'd like to focus on this year of 1913 because there's some interesting family and some interesting information that we have about them. So let me open my screen one more time. Let me see how I do that again. Let's see here. Current slide. Okay, so here we have a Jewish person, also from Denmark. His name was Fritz Nathan, and he settled in Iceland in the year 1913. He founded a company called Nathan and Olsen. This company is actually still around today. I don't know exactly who owns it, but it started way back then in 1913, very successful company. And they actually built this building. This Jewish person, Nathan, Fritz Nathan, built this building shortly after starting his business in Iceland. Now, it might not look like something so special, but this is a very unique building because this was considered to be a skyscraper in those days. This was the tallest building of the time. So this was considered to be a major accomplishment and a major achievement. This was the tallest building. I think it's 5 stories. But also this was the first building to be built with electricity. So that was another reason why this building is so famous and why this building is so important. So the tallest building of the time and the first building with electricity. Now, this family, Nathan, they lived in Iceland for just a few years. I think it was in 1916 or 1917 that he married, and after he married, he realized that Iceland and Reykjavik was not a place where it would be possible to live a Jewish life and to have a Jewish family. And so he decided to move back to Denmark, decided to move back to Copenhagen. So of course the business continued, and the business continued to be very successful. Mostly until the Second World War. Things changed after that, I think, for the business, but it was a very successful business. But he realized and he understood that he wouldn't be able to live there if he wanted to have a Jewish life. Moving along to the 1940s. In the year 1940, British forces arrived in Reykjavik, actually more specifically Keflavik. Keflavik is where the international airport is, and the reason why there's an international airport there, as far as I understand, is because that is where the British forces set up shop. So today it's the international airport. It's also a NATO base, just neighboring the international airport. But it was in the 1940s. In the year 1940, that British forces arrived in Reykjavik, and among them there were Jewish servicemen. And here you can see this might have been the first service, if you will. I'm pretty sure this is just before or after Rosh Hashanah or Yom Kippur. 1940, there was, I think, just a handful of Jewish servicemen stationed in Keflavik, not far from where we are right now, not far from Reykjavik. In 1941, the U.S. troops came to Iceland and took over the base. And they came in much larger numbers, and there were also many more Jewish soldiers. So in 1944, there was an estimated 2,000 Jewish soldiers. And because there were so many Jewish soldiers, they also sent a rabbi, and the rabbi was stationed in Keflavik. You can see this picture is from 1941. I think this is probably before the. This is probably still the British servicemen, but in 1944 they already had high holiday services with about 500 people. So this was mostly because of the U.S. soldiers that were stationed in Keflavik, and like I said, they had a rabbi there as well. Let me see how I get back to the Zoom. Let me see what's going on. Sorry about that. Trying to figure this out. Oh. Okay, I think I'm back to normal now. Okay, hopefully you guys can see me. If not, you're probably seeing some nice pictures, so it's good. Since the Second World War, it's become easier for Jewish people who were living in Iceland to connect with other Jews because there was a rabbi there not far away. There were Jewish soldiers, so there was a lot going on. They had shipments coming in for holidays, so there was certain access to Jewish life. So it became much easier for there were not many Jewish people living in Iceland at the time, but whoever was here had it a little bit easier. Fast forwarding to the 1970s, 1980s, we know people who were were here in those days to share with us the stories firsthand. And basically what started around then in the 1970s and 80s, they started the Jewish community. I would probably call it an informal Jewish community, or maybe more like a Jewish group. People who knew about the group would get together a few times a year. They would have holidays together. So maybe if it was Pesach, they would do like a potluck Seder. Everybody would get together and do something. So this happened a few times a year. I think it started in the 1970s, but it became a little bit more steady in the 80s and then in the late 80s. And this is pretty much what Jewish life was like over since around that time. Since around that time, there have been some rabbis visiting Iceland. So the rabbi who was here during the Second World War, that was just for a few years. That was not permanent. But over the years, since then, there's been visiting rabbis, and they had, some temporary services depending on what was going on at the time. The NATO base remained there till 2006. It closed in 2006, and now actually they're starting things up again. But this allowed the community, or the Jewish group in Iceland, to have certain benefits from a rabbi who would come visit, or if there was some shipments of Jewish items coming before the holidays, or whatever it might be. So there were times that the rabbi would travel from Keflavik to Reykjavik, just about 45-50-minute drive. So there were times that the community in Reykjavik had the opportunity to get together with the rabbi. Sometimes they had to go to Keflavik, but it was only in the 1940s that they had a rabbi stationed here. So after that, it was just here and there. There were these temporary visits, and there were these temporary services. But what kept it, what gave it a certain level of permanence, was the fact that there was some type of community in Reykjavik, mostly in Reykjavik. There was this group getting together. There were occasional bar mitzvahs, bat mitzvahs. There were occasional holiday events and things like that. And this pretty much went on for a few decades. From 2011, there were some yeshiva students who visited Iceland one to two times a year, and they would conduct, so let's say, high holiday services and Pesach Seder, or a Hanukkah party. So from 2011, you had these 1 to 2 visits a year by these rabbinical students or visiting rabbis, and that also gave a certain boost to the community here, who were kind of doing things on their own. My wife and I, we got married in 2014, and it was in 2017 that we had the opportunity to visit Iceland for the first time. So my wife is from Sweden, Gothenburg, Sweden, and I guess because I married her, that this part of the world became, more on our map and on my radar. Had you asked me 10 years ago if I would be living in Iceland today, I'd probably have no information on Iceland except for recognizing it from the Risk game or the looking at the globe. So I think it's because we got married that Iceland kind of came to my attention and our attention. So it was in 2017 that we started hearing about the Jewish people living in Iceland, and we were hearing of the need, that there's a need for a rabbi in a more permanent Jewish community, and so we decided to pay a visit to Reykjavik. So here in this picture, if I can share my screen again, in this picture you can see, there we go, hopefully you can see it. Current slide. Let me see what we're doing. Okay, so here, this is a picture from 2017. We have the opportunity to meet a bunch of people in the community. We were there for about a week. We had the opportunity to set up meetings with people, to get together with people, and then at the end, it was on Hanukkah. As you can see, there's a menorah in the front of the room. We had a Hanukkah party in one of the hotels in the downtown area of Reykjavik. So this was our first visit here. And it was a few months later for the holiday of Pesach that we came once again. And this time we came for a little bit longer, and we also had a wonderful Seder. And we had about, I think it was about 100 people for that first Seder that we spent in Iceland. It was not long after that. I think it was in June of 2018. So this is about 7 months after visiting Iceland for the first time that we moved to Iceland. So this is the English paper of Reykjavik, of Iceland. So you could see Q the Hav and Agila. And this is an article, one of the many articles that were published in connection to the Jewish community becoming more formal and the Jewish community becoming more organized and us moving to Iceland. So it was in many of the Icelandic newspapers. It was considered to be interesting news for people. So you could see that here. I'm going to share some of the highlights, some of the I would say more historic things that happened over the last couple of years since we moved there, and then I'll share some fun facts about Iceland, and then we'll go to your questions, which I think is going to be, might be most interesting for you guys. So we had the first public menorah lighting to take place in Iceland was actually in 2018. This picture is from 2019, but the first one was actually in 2018. We had a wonderful event, a wonderful ceremony. This intersection right here is probably the busiest intersection of Reykjavik. So it's where two of the main streets meet. Like the pedestrian streets. So it's basically closed off for cars for most of the year. So there's a lot of foot traffic here. So this is where we got the permit to put up the menorah for the entire Hanukkah. So the first time was in 2018. We had many people from the community, and we also had the former president and first lady of Iceland. The first lady of Iceland, the former first lady of Iceland, her name is Dorit Musayev, and she's actually an Israeli Jew who came to Iceland a bunch of years ago. She got married to the president in 2003, if I'm not mistaken. But they came, and so that was quite special for all of us. And I remember some people in the community were afraid that the menorah is going to be vandalized and that the event was going to be, disrupted. And so one of the people who were most concerned turned to me at the event and said, if the president is here, the president is the former president. He was and still is very popular, probably the most popular politician. So he said to me, if the president is here, it's going to be okay. The next year in 2019, as you can see in this photo here, we had, again, we got the permission to put the menorah in the same place. And this time we had the mayor of Reykjavik came. This time, not just, he didn't come just as a participant, but he was the one who lit up the menorah, and he made a wonderful speech, both in Icelandic and in English. And one of the things that he said, and I think that was very powerful, was he pointed to the menorah and he said, this is going to happen every single year. So I think this was something very, very inspiring and very powerful to hear from the mayor. And in Iceland, the mayor of Reykjavik is quite an important person, because Reykjavik is really most of the country. So to hear that to get the permission from the mayor and to have the mayor participate and speak and then announce that this is going to happen every year was a very powerful thing for us and for the entire community. Just a fun fact about getting the permission to put up the menorah on the main street of Reykjavik. So we sent in a formal request to City Hall, and it took quite a long time to get a response. We weren't sure what happened. But in the end, the permission came. And at a meeting where we were talking about the logistics of the menorah with the city, they said, "No, you should know that when the request came in, we didn't know what to do with it because we had no idea what this was all about." So the department that received the request, they sent it to their superiors, and they also didn't know what to do with it. So it kept going up and up, higher in the city offices until it reached the desk of the mayor. And when the mayor received it, he signed off on it immediately. So they were quite amazed that the staff at the city were quite amazed at how that took place. So of course we were very grateful to hear that. So in the next fun fact is that in Iceland, every religion and every community is registered with the government. So it's like this in some European countries, maybe most, I don't know exactly, but it's certainly like this in many European countries, and Iceland is the same. So the community registers with the government, and then besides for the recognition, there are certain benefits that the community could receive. So Judaism has never been registered in Iceland, believe it or not. So it's when we arrived in Iceland, we were talking with people and trying to figure out what was the most important thing to them, what they wanted to see in a more formal and more established Jewish community. So we tried very hard to, besides to implement what Jewish communities typically have, also to figure out what is most interesting and most exciting for people, and to try to make that happen. And one of the things that were very interesting for people was to see Judaism be registered in Iceland. So here you can see, let's see if we can put this up, screen sharing. Here you can see this is the formal meeting of the board members of the community, which has not been, it is still in the process of being approved, but all the paperwork has been done. The formal meeting has taken place, and this is in the beginning of 2020. Less than a year ago, we got all of the signatures that we needed to get. There's a minimum number. We had the formal meetings. We had all of the paperwork. Got it all done. And so I think this is quite an important step for the Jewish community, and this is something that is supposed to be approved any day now. Also in 2020, I know 2020 is not a great year for the world, but a few interesting things happened. In the first half of 2020. Also the second half, but here you're looking at the first half. This was probably in January. Here we have the first Holocaust memorial to ever take place in Iceland. So this picture is in the Polish embassy in Reykjavik. There was a cooperation between the Polish embassy, the University of Iceland, and the Jewish community. We all got together and we had a beautiful event, and there were a few speakers, and it was really it was covered by all of the news here, and I think it it was very well attended, and there were many representatives from other embassies and from the city, and it was something that is going to continue. We're actually preparing now for the next one, and there are many more partners this year. We have the U.S. Embassy, we have the German Embassy, and all of the ambassadors, and so this is something that many people in the community here feel strongly about, and this is something that I think is, of course, very important, not only for the Jewish community but for everyone in Iceland to learn about the Holocaust and to actually hear, stories, and to hear from people personal stories about their grandparents, stories that make it real, not just something in history books. Moving right along, we had the very first Torah to be completed in Iceland, happened in February of 2020. So here you can see this was I think just before it was completed, or just after, I don't remember. And we had this beautiful march down the main street of Reykjavik, and you could see some of the people in this picture dancing with the chuppah and the Torah, actually two Torahs. One of them is the one that we used for the last few years. It was just a borrowed Torah on loan, but then you see the new Torah, which was actually written here. So people in the community had the opportunity to fill in a letter, to write a letter, have their own letter in the Torah, and it was really an amazing event for everyone who participated. And there were, of course, many Icelanders who just happened to be on the street, and everybody was cheering it on, and it was really a sight to see. And the last picture, which I would like to show you, is the I guess the second half of 2020. We've been working to establish the very first synagogue of Iceland. So you're looking at the future a Jewish center and synagogue of Iceland. We started planning this pre-pandemic, but now hopefully in the next few months the project will hopefully be completed. And this, I think, is something very historic. Of course, the first permanent synagogue and Jewish center in Iceland. What they had in the past was what we had in the past, and what Iceland had in the past was, temporary places and rented spaces or borrowed spaces. And I think this is going to be a very historic step for the Jewish community and for Iceland to have a synagogue of our own. So this is pretty much a timeline of what's been going on in Iceland in terms of the Jews living in Iceland. I know the beginning we skipped many years. There is just not so much information and not so much activity, but I think I pointed out some of the important moments in history, and some of the things that we had information about and that we knew about. I'll just share a few fun facts about Iceland, and then we will go to your questions. So people always ask, how many Jews are there in Iceland? So again, there is no official number because the Jewish community has never been registered. Before we moved to Iceland, we didn't know exactly how many Jews were here. Some people said 25, some people said 50, some people said 100. Nobody knew exactly how many Jews there were. I remember I was in the bookstore in Brooklyn, New York, and I was purchasing the prayer books, the Sidurim, and I had about 75 prayer books with me. in my cart, these cases. So someone behind me knew I was going to Iceland. He said, "What do you need so many books for Iceland?" It was actually a friend of mine. He said, "What do you need so many?" It's probably just a few Jews in Iceland. So I said, "Listen, we don't know exactly." A few months later, I called up my friend and I said, "We ran out of prayer books. We need more." So we know about 300 Jews probably that we've gotten to know over the last few years. I can tell you that every single week we hear about and we meet Jews who we have not met before. So I'm confident that that there are many more Jews who we don't know about, who we have not met yet. So if I had to throw a number, I would probably say 400 or 500 Jews in Iceland. Yeah. So what else do we have about Iceland? We have very extreme days and nights. So sunset in the summer could be shortly after midnight, shortly after 12 o'clock. I think it's 12:04 to be exact. So if you think about Shabbat and when Shabbat begins, that's quite epic. So Shabbat would start at midnight. Technically, we start Shabbat at the earliest possible time, which in Iceland is about 2 hours before that. So in June, when Shabbat starts at about midnight, we're doing the early Shabbat, and we're sitting down for Shabbat dinner at about 10 p.m. And of course, the sun is shining through the windows and into our eyes while we're doing the Kiddush. And then in the winter, we have sunset about 3:30. 3:30. I know that doesn't sound so early. When living in New York, we would have sunset in December, probably about 4:30. But I think the most interesting thing about Iceland is that sunrise in December is as late as 11:20 in the morning. So we get a pretty short day. But the good news is that it moves quite quickly, and sometimes 40, 50 minutes a week. The day could get short. Right now, the day is getting shorter by about 45 minutes a week. So that goes till December, and then it goes the other way. Yeah, so that's in terms of the times. So Shabbat in the summer we have the white nights. It doesn't actually get dark, so we just go to sleep and Shabbat kind of finishes. When we wake up in the morning, we have the Havdalah service. Yeah, so that's some of the interesting things about Iceland. I know Iceland sounds very cold, but it's actually not super cold. I think in New York, the winters in New York could be much more difficult than in Iceland, believe it or not. It's actually not that cold in Iceland because of the Gulf Stream. We get the temperature from the Gulf Stream, so that's why it's not as cold as it probably would normally be at this latitude. So it actually doesn't get that cold. What we do have is extremely strong winds. So I was sitting on the Icelandair flight on the way to Iceland, and there was this advertisement on the screen in front of me, and it said the most interesting thing about Iceland is not that it's the third windiest place in the world. The most interesting thing about Iceland is that nobody lives in the first two. Okay, I would love to hear your questions.
Looks like Bill has a question. Bill.
Please.
Oh.
I think you're on mute.
Bill.
I'm unmuted. I'll repeat. I did it before it went back. What is your background training, Rabbi? Orthodox, conservative, Reform, or other?
So I've been raised Orthodox, but I always tell people in Iceland that the Jewish community is just Jewish. We have people of all backgrounds, and we have people of all levels of observance, and people from all different kinds of places. And this is really the Jewish community where everyone gets together, and we don't focus on the differences and different types of Jewish practice. Instead, we take the holiday and we celebrate together, and we focus on what we all have in common. And it's quite amazing, and it's quite inspiring to see so many different people from so many different walks of life getting together and celebrating together.
One other question, and then I'll be quiet. So you have a personal interest in this question, since you have 4 children. One, I'd like to know their ages, and 2, what sort of provisions are you able to make for children's religious education?
So we have 4 girls, ages, the oldest is almost 5. She'll be 5 in January. The next one is 3.5. Then we have 2, and 1 that was just born a few months ago.
Mazel tov. One comment, and then I'll be quiet. Fathers, Rabbi, let me teach you something. 3 daughters. Fathers don't have daughters. Daughters have fathers. And you already have learned that.
Very well said. Very well said.
Religious and the religious education question, please, sir. And
Yeah. So we're
I'm
starting
mute you now.
We're starting a Jewish preschool. And the first Jewish preschool of Iceland. We already have the approval from the city, which is quite a big deal. And this is going to be a place where of course we have all types of people joining the school. It's not necessarily for religious people. It's a Jewish school, and anyone who wants to have a Jewish education, learn about the holidays and learn Hebrew, and learn about all important stuff. It's happening here. So we have the Jewish preschool, and hopefully this will turn into a school down the line. But in the meantime, we're taking one step at a time.
Kenny?
Hi, Rabbi. Where's the mikvah? Because until you got a synagogue, you had to have a mikvah for some of the women that may be more Orthodox, including your wife.
That's a fantastic question. There is not a regular mikvah like you probably have in Houston. Instead, we use the natural mikvah, which is a hot spring, believe it or not. So we have many hot springs here in Iceland, and it is quite an adventure to go to the mikvah in Iceland. I can tell you that. It could be in the middle of the winter. You have the snow all around you. You have just the open nature, and then boiling hot water in the actual lagoon. It's a very epic mikvah, and it's quite an adventure for everyone who's tried it. We've had some really fun stories that we've heard from people who use the mikvah. So
no bears, no alligators.
No, it's completely safe, except for a short hike that you need to go from the car to the actual hot spring. The one that we use, it's about a 5-minute hike.
Okay.
So if you don't slip on the ice or the snow, then it's a pretty good experience.
Thank you.
Is the mikveh totally outside, or is it enclosed some degree?
So it is in the nature. So we don't own, the Jewish community does not own the land. There's no house there. There's no indoors. It's just in the middle of the nature. So what we did was we checked out multiple locations until we found one that we felt was suitable. So there are some of these hot springs that are very famous tourist attractions. So of course, these are not the ones that we're going to recommend for the mikvah. We're going to look for a private place. And so the one that we now recommend is about a 90-minute drive from Reykjavik, and it's just about a 5-minute walk from the car to the hot spring, and it's a pretty good experience.
All right, Kenny, go ahead.
This is a little bit of a difficult question, but in today's climate, I was curious about the Icelandic Jews or Icelanders in general, what they think about the U.S. political situation now, without drawing conclusions one way or the other, if you had any opinion.
Well, the first policy we have at the Jewish events, at least everyone talks about what they want to talk about, but we try to create a space where at least my wife and we are apolitical. We do not get involved in any of the political discussion. But I think in general, how do I answer this question? They did a poll. They did a poll in one of the newspapers, and I think they said that I think they put Biden at 90% and Trump at 10%. So that's what I read in the news. So here, but I don't know if that helps. I don't know if that answers your question.
That's good enough. Good enough.
Okay.
Rabbi,
Yeah.
I would like to know the average age of your congregation, and also if you could speak a little bit about how they all got to Reykjavik.
That's a great question. So it's a fairly young community. So many young families and a lot of young people. Of course, we have people of all ages, but it's a pretty young community. And we have people from all different backgrounds. So we have some Icelandic Jews from several generations back. And then we have many expats from all different countries, European countries, the United States, South America, Israel. So we really have a very diverse Jewish community. And it's, again, it's really so beautiful to see so many different people from so many different places, so many different levels of observance. Everyone's getting together, and it's really one united Jewish community. So I think it's very, very inspiring for me to see that and to experience that.
Also, do you have a cantor?
What's that?
Do you have a cantor at the synagogue?
So we have, we kind of have a cantor. We have someone who, his name is Mike Levin, and he originally is from Chicago. He moved to Iceland in 1986, if I'm not mistaken, and he was kind of a cantor, I guess, whatever a kid could do. He was a cantor in his synagogue back home in Chicago, so he remembers some of the songs and some of the things, and he's learning many more. So we kind of have him do some of the cantorial things, but I do a lot of the cantor job too.
Rabbi, you're probably not also a moil, and so when your first son comes, who's going to do the bris in Iceland?
Hospital.
So first of all, I probably should mention that in 2018 there was a proposed ban on circumcision. So it was a very controversial bill that was proposed, and the country was, I think, sharply divided, and there was a lot of discussion within Iceland and internationally. In the end, it did not pass. It was shelved. So we were very happy about that, and we were working hard. That there should be a voice from within Iceland. We were in touch with doctors and other religious leaders, and we were very pleased that in the end it didn't pass. Pre-pandemic, I would say, I would answer that it's no big deal if a community doesn't have a mohel, because we could just fly somebody in.
Yeah.
Now I don't have the answer to that question right now, but hopefully this is going to be over soon, and hopefully it'll continue to be easy for people to travel back and forth, and hopefully the world will have no more of this pain, suffering, and death. We hope and pray for better times, and may it be very soon.
I'm gonna take a couple questions from the chat here. So
Yeah,
Judy wants to know, is there a Jewish cemetery in Iceland?
that's a great question. So there are many Jewish graves in Iceland, and I visited some of them. You could just be in the middle of a cemetery, and all of a sudden you see one with Hebrew letters or a Star of David and things like that. But actually, over the last few months, we've been working to get a Jewish cemetery, and just I think it was in June or July, we were able to secure an entire area in one of the regular cemeteries, and this is going to be dedicated. We actually didn't do the dedication ceremony yet. We're going to wait until things get better. But we actually received, the Jewish community received a plot of land which is going to be dedicated for the Jewish community. We hope that we don't need to use it anytime soon, but this is an important step for every Jewish community, and I think we're very lucky that we've had such good connection and relationships with people in the city, people in the government, and we've been treated very well, us and as in the Jewish community.
We have two questions about the new synagogue building going up. Vicky wants to know, what street is the synagogue on? And Susan wants to know, is it downtown?
So the address is Lindargata 50. It is in the center of Reykjavik. It is prime location. It is near all of the major hotels. It is a great location where people could just walk over. It's really very, very central. It's a place that is you could see it in the picture. It's 3 floors, and so the vision is, and the plan is, that the kindergarten and school and future restaurant, kosher restaurant or cafe, is going to be on the ground floor. The middle floor is going to be the community kitchen and multi-purpose room. So that's going to be the synagogue, the social hall, the dining hall. So that's going to be all in one place. There's an outdoor area for the sukkah. We just finished Sukkot, so we're thinking about that too. And we are hoping that this is going to be successful. And I didn't mention this earlier, but of course there are so many Jewish tourists, not now, but on a regular year, especially in the summer, but actually all year round. There are so many visitors, and many of these visitors want to come to see the synagogue, see the Jewish center, join us for Shabbat or something. So this location allows us to accommodate all of the tourists and all of the visitors as well. So it's a really great location for that. So I think this is post-pandemic. I think this is going to be a game changer for anyone visiting Iceland and looking to participate in the Jewish community.
From Jan, 2 questions from her. She wants to know what's the main source of work in Iceland, and also what's the main export?
So the main work and export, probably the same answer to both questions, is first of all the fish industry. There's a lot of fishing and there's a lot of export fishing. Also because they use energy from they use geothermal energy, so energy is quite inexpensive. So they what do you call it? They process aluminum here. So they have these huge factories where they process aluminum, and they do a lot of export of that as well. Of course, the tourist industry is quite a big industry, especially from about 2010. Tourism became really big here, and that's on hold for now. But that's another big thing for people here. And I would say that because it's a small country, there are so many people who are just doing all of the, filling the government jobs and the city jobs and all of the things that any country would need. So it is only 330,000 people here. There's a lot that has to get done for the country to run. So there's a lot of just of everything,
Sandy.
Yes, two questions. Was Iceland impacted? Two very different questions. By World War II, and the second part is, what is the COVID situation?
So World War II was basically first the British and then the Americans occupying Iceland, and then using Iceland as a place to have a base and to do what needed to be done from here. So Iceland didn't really have a part. In the war. They were actually, up until 1944, they were controlled by Denmark. So there were certain policies that Denmark made that Iceland basically followed with. Some very few Jewish refugees were able to come to Iceland, and actually some Jews were deported, I think, to Denmark, and then from Denmark, I don't think that they stayed in Denmark. I think they were sent back to, or not back, but they were sent to maybe some of the camps. So there's some history that people here are not proud of, but like I said, there was not too much going on here in terms of the war. So there were very few refugees that came, but that was a policy that they weren't really taking people in, and there were actually a few people who were sent away. So that did in fact happen. In terms of COVID-19, so in the beginning, in mid-March, I think, or beginning of March, when kind of hit Iceland, it was very controlled, and in a way very easy to control, because it's such a small country, and it's also easy to seal off. So for a very long time, we had the luxury of basically continuing with normal living, except for very large gatherings. But even those restrictions started to phase out fairly quickly. So for a very long time, probably until the middle of the summer, life was almost normal. But actually, just recently, there's been a spike. So now that they're calling it the second wave, but actually it's much worse than it was back in March. But still not that bad. It's only, relatively speaking, compared to what it was. So now there are many more restrictions than we had back in March. But even now, schools are open, stores are open. Most things are pretty much normal, except that there are limits to how many people could be in a store at once. Depending on the size of the store, people are wearing masks a lot, and there are certain things are closed, like bars and restaurants and things like that. But they do a lot of things to accommodate the business and keep the economy going. They have outdoor dining and they have all kinds of things. So they're trying to keep things going, but also take control over it. If you want to come into the country, right now there are only certain countries that are allowed in. Even if you could come in, there's 2 tests. So there's a test when you arrive, a COVID test, and there's a 5-day mandatory quarantine, and then there's a second mandatory test. And only after you have the second test could you go to regular shops and things like that. So I think it's a pretty good situation, relatively speaking, compared to other places. But again, it's much easier for them because it's a small population and it is an island.
All right, we'll do 3 more questions, starting with Marion.
Sure. Thanks for all of this. What about kosher foods, kosher restaurant, eating together before you get your building done, or if it is done, I might have zoomed out there, because that's really important. I know to you mainly, and I don't know how many other people. So that kosher piece, getting the food in and out.
So many people have interest in keeping kosher. It's been very difficult, just because kosher, many kosher things are not readily available here. But once we moved here, we discovered that because so much is imported into Iceland from the US, from the UK, from other places in Europe, because there's so much import, so many things are actually already kosher. So you could
Correct.
find in any supermarket, there's no kosher aisle, but you could actually, if you know what to look for, and if you've spent enough time there, you could find many products. Of course, there's excellent fish here, so that's not a problem at all. And we actually got a license to import kosher meat, so it's very controlled here. But we actually did succeed in obtaining the license, and we already had some shipments of kosher meat. Another interesting thing that happened over the last few months was that for the first time there is kosher wine available in Iceland. So alcohol in general is also very tightly controlled. You need 2 separate licenses to import something yourself. So we worked with a company, and we were able to get 2 bottles of kosher wine available in the government-controlled alcohol shops all over the country.
And restaurants, any at all, or anything that looks like a breakfast place, a lunch place for you guys, so you don't have to cook every meal?
In the future, there is going to be a beautiful kosher restaurant in the Jewish center of Iceland. In the meantime, we need to make that happen.
Okay, so that's one of your job. You're looking for someone that wants to move there. Very good. I'll put the word out. Do you know Rabbi Chaim Lazarus that's here also?
I don't know him personally, but I think I met him once or twice.
Okay, good. No worries. Thank you.
All right, so connected to the Synagogue, the Jewish Center of Iceland, Barry and Sandy wanted to know, they love the building, what it looks like, but they were curious if security was considered in its design, how security will look there.
So Iceland is considered to be the safest country in the world, according to some studies. Of course, we always want to make sure that that we're being careful anyways. So we have certain measures in place. So when we have events, there's usually someone from the community standing at the door to make sure that everyone who's coming in is supposed to be there. So we have certain precautions that we take, but in general, it's considered to be extremely safe, and we have not had any problems, and we have not had any instances of anti-Semitism, thank God. And people here feel very safe. But of course, we're always going to keep our eyes open and always be careful. In terms of the actual building, we're included in the building plan is to install, you know, a proper security system where there's surveillance and with his you know, a buzzing in system and all of that, you know, on all sides of the building.
Yeah, I think Iceland's so safe that police don't even carry guns. Is that right?
That's true. There's a gun in the car. I think it's under a lock and key, and they need to obtain permission before using it. They need to call in to get permission before using it.
Wow. It's kind of like if you had to call permission to use the Torah or something. I don't know. Just kidding. All right. So last
Your population might go way up after the election.
Mm.
All right. So these are, you know, some funnier ones from Vicky. She wants to know, are you studying Icelandic? And also from Judy, she's curious, is it true that Icelandic people do not have last names?
So both great questions. First of all, I am starting to learn Icelandic. It took me a little bit longer than planned to actually get started, but it is a very difficult language. I think that explains the delay. But I'm actually starting to study it now. Of course, my wife is way ahead of me. She's much better with it, and she also has the Swedish to help her out with that. In terms of the last names, so it's pretty old-fashioned here, where people don't have last names, and their last name is the name of their father. So if your father's name is Jon or John, your last name is Jonsson or Jonsdottir. So Johnson or John's daughter. So that's how all of the names are.
Actually, when I was in Iceland, I was told that if you want to study Old English, you come to Iceland.
Okay. I don't know where they're teaching that, but could very well be.
All right. Well, any other last?
I just want to say, if there are no other questions, if there are, I'm happy to answer more. But I would like to say that, of course, every one of you are invited to visit Iceland. It's a beautiful country. It's really amazing at every turn and every bend. And of course, we would love to see you in the Jewish Center of Iceland. So everyone is invited, and we would love to see you here as soon as things get better.
Rabbi, I'd like to know how you met your wife.
So my wife was first studying in the US and then working in the US, first in Chicago and then in New York. So we were both in New York, and then my cousin knew about my wife. Her name is Mushki, and she was the one who recommended that we meet. And so we dated, and the rest is history.
She's beautiful.
Thank you. She is.
Is there anyone else in the in your family, relatives that are in the Chabad movement? Since we've had Denmark, we had you. Maybe looking for another family member in the future. I don't know. So Rabbi Lowenthal in Copenhagen is actually my uncle through marriage. So he's actually my wife Mushki's uncle. Her family, they are much more exotic than my family, but I do have a cousin in Greece, in Athens. So I think that that's pretty interesting. But aside from that, most of my family's in the tri-state area, some in California, some in Israel. My father's from Israel, so we have a lot of family there.